Welcome back. Final video, frequent challenges of implementing the management of things pillar of the livable law method. First, mixing case file and work product. It's going to happen. And people are going to be confused about what it means to be in a case file, what it means to be in a work file. It was confusing for a while. So the words or expressions I've used to get over that is, first of all, case file means that either it came from the outside or we sent it to the outside. Work file is where all of our drafts are. If something is sent out, then you can save it in the case file. If it has never been sent out or it has never been received from the outside, it doesn't belong in the case file. You are going to see some mixing and matching every now and again, which goes back to the fact that this needs to be implemented. You need to have training on this, and you need to have, at least at the start, definitely reinforcement mechanisms. So checking on the folders, making sure they're properly organized, and occasionally having somebody whose task is to clean up the folder. And if it is the person who's been mixing the information, that's actually the better person to pick, because if they have to keep cleaning up, they'll probably stop doing it as things move forward. And it'll also help them get more of a sense of control about what it means to be case file and work file. Next one is a biggie, huge one. The lack of logging and indexing. It's more of a lack of discipline issue, but certainly one that is going to be painful. One way to address this is that you find one or two people whose role is the logging and the indexing. That is their job. Because once you give that task to someone and it is their task, there's a sense of ownership. And then there is a level of competence and discipline that becomes part of the role. The hard part is when you have somebody who's doing a ton of other things and they just can't be bothered. And that is what happens. Or they have their own system, which is even more problematic because you have to explain, just because you understand it doesn't mean the whole team does, and the whole team needs to understand it. And that's not how we've operated for a long time, but generationally, that is how we are operating now and how we're going to operate moving forward. So definitely have formal training on this. And then be absolutely adamant that it has to be done moving forward, and then assign someone whose job it is to make sure that things are being logged and indexed appropriately. The next one is inconsistent document naming and versioning. This comes down to training, training, training. It just is. This is how we do it at this firm. This is how it needs to be done. An important part, though, is consistency and clarity. You need to have standard operating procedures, and they're a pain to write up. I know, I did it. But they are helpful down the line, because then everybody can go back to it and say, okay, well, that's how we're doing it, and that is how we are doing it. One really critical thing is to not start slipping away from it and not be inconsistent. So for example, if you ask people to name documents one way, don't you start naming them a different way. And don't let people name them 15 different ways. Have a standard operating procedure, use these slides, right? And write them down and say, this is how we're going to be naming files, and this is how we're going to be organizing our folders. And then finally, okay, I'm going to get on my soapbox. If you read my book, I am very harsh on this topic. You will forever ban, and I mean forever, you will forever ban the folder miscellaneous. If anything belongs in miscellaneous, nothing belongs in miscellaneous. Miscellaneous is where you put things when you don't know where else to put them. It's not that it actually belongs there, it's just you can't figure out where else it belongs. The big problem with miscellaneous folders is that, first, they absolutely make it impossible to find that document later on, except if you're the person who put it in there, which goes back to the overarching concept that folders and files have to be a way to communicate. There is no communication happening if one person knows the file is in there. Also, if there is a miscellaneous folder, it is actually a symptom of a lack of organization and a lack of systematic placement of documents elsewhere. Because if it exists in a law firm, it is very likely not something that has never existed before. And so it should have a folder for it. So for example, if you have a folder that you want to have for expenses related to the case, so people start dropping receipts in miscellaneous. Don't do that. You can look at it and say, well, you know what? We need a folder for expenses. And you may find stuff in there like drafts of, esoteric documents that you have a work file. And then within the work file, you can create a folder for whatever particular document you've been creating. But please never again implement a miscellaneous folder. I would be so eternally grateful. Okay, that's it. A couple of closing remarks. To me, burnout is a question of survival, and addressing burnout, reducing burnout, challenging burnout. It's not just about making the law a better place to practice. That's important, but that's not just the only issue. Burnout overwhelmingly and catastrophically affects women, and especially women of color. And that infuriates me because we are paying lip service to the concept of DEI and then doing nothing to actually address the issues that are driving women out of the profession. I burnt out twice. I don't litigate anymore. And in large part, it was because the profession was unlivable. Thankfully, I found another way to practice, which makes me much happier, and so I never have to go back to litigation. But I really wanted to be a litigator, and I spent a long time trying to be a litigator, and I was a really good one. But I kept encountering systems that were absolutely not worried about protecting the team and hell-bent on serving the client, and somehow catering to completely disorganized and dysfunctional systems put in place that people who were great matter managers, but were not process managers. The livable law is about process management. And I'm so glad you took this course, because it means that now there is one more person out there who can make the law more livable.